Hello, welcome to this Gespi's Atari stuff video. Last year Atari surprised us with the introduction of the Atari 2600 Plus. This remake of the original 2600 was such a big success that Atari released the 17800 Plus this year. In the meantime, we have been able to gain some experience with both consoles, so it's time for a video with 5 tips for the Atari 17800 Plus and 2600 Plus. The 17800 Plus and 2600 Plus are technically almost the same. Therefore, most tips apply to both 17800 Plus and 2600 Plus. At the time of making this video, the 17800 Plus had only been just released, but the 2600 Plus had already been on the market for a year. So enough time to collect 5 tips. Let's go and start with number 1.
Tip number 1.
Viewers who have already seen my review video of the 7800 Plus know that the 7800 Plus has a settings menu. You can get this menu by switching on the 7800 Plus without a cartridge and then press select and reset together after the system has booted. Here we see a number of filters that you can set. With the select button you step through the menu and with the reset button you change a setting. First we look at the 50 Hz mode option. This had to do with the different TV systems that were there. If you activate the 50 Hz mode, the 7800 Plus will look at the cartridge for which system the game was originally made. If it's an NTSC cartridge, it generates a 60 Hz signal. If it's a PAL cartridge, it generates a 50 Hz signal. However, this can cause problems because sprites may disappear. As you probably know, if there are a lot of moving figures, the Atari could not display them correctly. This created the well-known flickering effect, which Pac-Man was most known for. In that case, it can happen that such a coast is not displayed at all on the 17800 Plus. I encountered this with Miss Pac-Man. But now you can solve this by switching off the 50 Hz mode. And then we have the bilinear filter. This causes that the pixels are displayed a bit fuzzy. This makes the jagged edges less visible, but the image does become a bit blurrier. I tested this with River Raid and I cannot say I find this an improvement. Good that you can also switch this off again. Finally, we also have the phosphor filter. If you activate this, moving pixels will leave some kind of glow. That used to be the case with phosphor of the CRT screens. If I turn this filter on and start spacing faders, this becomes clearly visible. The bombs that the aliens drop get a kind of tail. This is also visible with the rockets that you fire with the cannon. So this settings menu is in the 7800 Plus. But can you also get this menu on the 2600 Plus? Yes, you can, if you install the latest firmware. Here too you get the menu with the select and reset buttons in a system without a cartridge. But as you can see, this has a number of extra options. For example, there is the integer scaling option. I could not really see the effect until a user of Atari Age posted 2 images that clearly showed the effect. This is how the game Demolition Herbie normally looks on the 2600 Plus. And if you turn on integer scaling, it looks like this. A big improvement. And then we have the 2-button mode. It turns out there are a few 2600 games that support the 2 buttons of the 7800 controllers. By enabling this option, this is now also supported on the 2600 Plus. So, to get the settings menu on the 2600 Plus, you need to upgrade the firmware. And that brings us to the next tip.
Tip number 2.
So by upgrading the firmware you get that settings menu. But there are more reasons to update the firmware. better compatibility with certain games, for example. And if you live in Europe and have a 2600 Plus with the stock version of the firmware, then it is a must to update. With the stock firmware, many games are not displayed correctly. Atari has created a page on its website that explains how to install the new firmware. The page also contains a link to the files needed for this. Download this folder and unzip it to a folder on your local drive. Now you have the latest official firmware. But that is not always really the latest version. If you really want the very latest, then go to Atari Age. There you will find the beta versions firmware. Here you can read what has been improved with the different versions. And here is the link to the latest firmware. Download this file and place it in the folder with the other files. And then we have also updates for the cartridge dumper. Download the latest version of this as well. When everything has been downloaded and placed in the folder, we have this situation of files. The firmware from the Atari side and the beta firmware from the Atari Age forum. The dumper update from Atari and the dumper update from Atari Age. If you haven't installed the driver from a previous update, then unzip this file as well. And this dev tool must also be unzipped, because we need it for the firmware update. Then we go back to the Atari site and read the instructions carefully. We start with step 1. Connect the 2600 Plus to your computer with the USB cable. Then we set the TV type switch to BW. We hold the game select switch down and switch on the system. You will then hear a sound from the computer and then you release the game select switch. Now start the dumper updater. Not the one from the Atari side, but the one from Atari Age. This should then display the status detected. Then press the large download button. The dumper software on the 2600 will be updated. After the dumper software, we will update the firmware. To do this, set the switch back to color. Then this time we hold the game select switch down and switch on the system. When we hear the sound again, we can release the game select switch. If you have not installed the driver yet, now is the time to do so. Follow the instructions on the Atari side clearly. In my case, it is already installed from a previous update, so we will skip this. We go to the dev tool from the other zip file. There we start rkdevtool.exe. If the driver has been installed correctly, we will see found one Mescrom device there. Then we go to the Update Firmware tab and click on Firmware. There we do not select the file from the Atari side, but the one from Atari Age. Then we click on Upgrade. Now the firmware will be updated. When that is done, we turn off the 2600 Plus and disconnect it from the computer. Now we're going to test if the update was successful. Yes, it was successful. At the bottom right you can see version 2.0.1.1. Let's see if we can get the settings menu now. Yes, here we have the menu. So that was the 2600 Plus. But is there also an update for the 7800 Plus? Yes, there is. Not yet official on the Atari side, but there is already a beta version on Atari Age. This has a new update tool, which is not compatible with the 2600 Plus drivers. So if you have installed drivers for that, you must first uninstall them. Or install this update from another computer. You can download the new update tool from this link. Once the tool has been downloaded, we start it. This tool is much simpler than the process for the 2600 Plus. We start by installing the drivers for the 7800 Plus. Then we connect the 7800 Plus to the computer with the USB cable. Next step is to turn on the system while holding down the reset button. After hearing the beep, we click on Update. The firmware is now being updated. When that is done, we turn off the 17800 Plus again. Then we turn it on again, but now with the Select button pressed. Then we press Update again. Now the dumper software is updated. It is ready. We can start testing it. And it works. At the bottom right we now see version 2.0.1.2. Let's go to the option menu. And look, now we also have the 2 extra options here. The process for the 17800 Plus is a lot easier than for the 2600 Plus. However, Atari is currently working on creating such an updater for the 2600 Plus too.
Tip number 3.
The 17800 Plus comes with the game Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest. According to many, this is one of the best Atari games ever made. So it was a good choice to include it with this console. Although there's also one big disadvantage. The game was one made in the US with the CX24 Pro line joystick in mind. And the 17800 Plus comes with the CX78 Europad. And for one of the actions in the game, both buttons have to be pressed. And let this almost be impossible with the CX78 gamepad. If you look at the manual, we see there are 2 actions. With the first button you do a run throw. And with the other button a jump. But there is also a third action, the running jump. You get this when you press both buttons. This action is needed to jump over the rocks. But pressing both buttons is very difficult with the CX78. Usually you hold the controller like this. Then you have one finger left for the thumbstick or D-pad in the left hand, and from the right hand one finger for one of the buttons. If you have very large hands, you could perhaps move the thumbstick this way and also press the first button. With my hands I can do that. But it is possible to press both buttons by holding the controller a bit different. First make a V sign with the fingers of your right hand. Then slide the controller between your thumb and fingers. By tilting the controller forward a bit, you can still hold the controller with your other fingers. Let's try this with Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest. Okay, that takes some getting used to. Let's try again. That went better. Yes, it's getting better. But it will take a lot of practice. So, Crystal Quest is made for the CX24 joystick. Too bad I don't have one. I always wanted one to add to my collection. But this is of course a good excuse to put it in practice. And after some searching, I found one. Let's quickly open this so we can test it. It's supposed to be a new old stock. And it seems to be true. And indeed, with this one pressing 2 buttons is a lot easier. Hey, even the plastic film is still on. Okay, we're going to try it with Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest. I connect the CX24 to my 7800 Plus. Let's see if it works. Well, that's not easy at all. One more time. Aha! The problem is, the joystick is too difficult to hold when you press both buttons. That's why the joystick tilts to the side. Now I understand why they call it the painline controller. Maybe hold it with the other hand. No, then it can't be controlled at all. That's not easy. I tried it for a while and for me it works best if I hold it like this. So tilt it 90 degrees. Not that it becomes very easy then. But it seems that the ProLine controller works. So I can remove the film. That is a long time ago that I removed the plastic film of an Atari product. Nice. Yeah, I think I prefer the CX78 with my fingers in the V shape. But I still have to practice a lot in both cases.
Tip number 4.
One of the nice things about the 2600 Plus and the 7800 Plus is that I go game hunting again, looking for game cartridges. But before you buy a retro game cartridge, there are a few things you should pay attention to. If we go to the Atari website and then to the page about the 7800 Plus, we see the following in the specifications. Near perfect compatibility with original and third-party Atari games. Near perfect, so not 100% compatibility. And if we go to the 2600 Plus page, compatible with most 2600 and 7800 cartridges. So we have to pay attention before we buy a cartridge whether the game works on your console. On this page there's also a link to a page which shows which games work with the 2600 Plus. So it's wise to check this list before you buy the cartridge. But this list is not complete. We also see that the list was last updated in 2023. For a really complete list, we go to my favorite forum of Atari Age again. Here we go to the topic Compatibility Spreadsheet. This topic was created by the user Kian Xiaowei. Here we find a link to a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet contains a much more complete list, filled in by the community. Here is indicated per game whether it works and with which firmware version. It also shows whether it has been tested with NTSC or PAL version. Here we see, for example, a cartridge that works partly. So, first look up the game that you want to buy in this list. This prevents surprises when you want to try the cartridge at home. And if you bought the game after checking the list, do not slide it straight into the console. It is wise to first clean the contact points. The cartridge may have guarded dust for decades before you bought it. The contact points can easily be cleaned with a Q-tip and some alcohol. Dip one end of the Q-tip in the alcohol. With that end, wipe the contact points clean. When that is done, dry it with the other end. You can clearly see how much dirt comes off via the Q-tip. There is an unwritten law in YouTube land that the video with lists always consists of a top 3, top 5 or top 10, never a top 4. So here comes...
Tip number 5.
Do you remember that you used to get this kind of adapter with your device? Now you get this, a USB cable, and find the plug yourself. I know, I used to think, I have that lying around somewhere. But now that every device is delivered without a plug, they are running out. So you have to buy one. But which one? Or maybe it's not necessary after all. There are currently many unboxing videos of the 17800 and 2600 Plus on YouTube. And in almost all videos you see the same reaction when the box with accessories is opened. A slight disappointment that there is no power plug included. So that means buying it yourself. It is important to know how much power it should able to supply. For this we will look what is on the box. First, the 17800 Plus. It looks like it has enough with 1 ampere. And the 2600 Plus? Also 1 ampere. This means a small phone charger is enough. But that also means that other sources are also enough. Most televisions also have an USB connection. If the Atari needs so little power, a television can also supply that. So I connect the cable to the USB connection on the back of the television. I'm going to test this with the 2600 Plus. When I turn on the 2600, it doesn't start yet. Because the television is still off, it doesn't get any power. And when I'm turning on the television, the 2600 Plus will now also start. So this way, you don't need a power plug. Also handy when there is no free wall outlet available near your television. And with this tip, this video ends. Links to all pages mentioned in this video you can find here below. I hope there was useful information for you. If so, then please click the like button. And then click also subscribe, then my videos will appear in your YouTube feed. And you support this channel with it. Thanks for watching and see you at the next Gespi Atari stuff video. Bye!